Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 7 and 8, so this is going to be the first video grouping chapters together. But it makes sense in this case because these two chapters are very much kind of back to back. Chapter 8 is a direct kind of response in a way to what happens in chapter 7, so it makes sense to do them back to back. I will mention I do have YouTube channel membership and Patreon available if you would like to help support the channel, and if you come in at the higher tier you'll gain early access to videos in this series. But let's jump in here. So this is a very interesting one because obviously, like I said, the first 6 chapters are like the intro to the book. We now know what's going on. My best friend is gone. That was the cliffhanger on the last chapter. Susu is gone to the upper ring. Now we get how Jin feels now that Susu is gone. Just this major force in a way in her life gone. How's she impacted by that? And we see that she's out of sorts for the rest of the week. She can't concentrate at school, and things are tough. She thinks it just isn't fair. It's the lower ring, the reality of the lower ring coming to a head. And she's also thinking to herself, like, even if I succeed at school and go on to like get a job kind of coming out of this, that job is probably going to be in administration, sort of almost helping to facilitate stuff like what happened to Susu. Do I want to be part of that? Kind of almost assisting with trading people like currency is like what it says. So she's very much doubting just how fair everything is and if she wants to be a part of this, which is when she has this encounter at school with Chuan, as well as his 2 friends. So we do get their names here. So we have Rende, Orende, not sure how to say that name, waiting for the audiobook on that one, and also Jiang. Now, these are basically the characters I think who were from the initial chapter where Chuan was introduced. But anyway, what we get here is that they go up to ask her to join their team for the upcoming competition at school, which is called the Grand Showcase. So this is this thing where the top students from each class display their achievements. The Grand Showcase is the final team competition in the 4 areas taught at the academy: speech, essay, calligraphy, and poetry. So they want Jin on their team because she is really, really good at calligraphy, which happens to be the weakness of the other 3 members of the team. So that's why they want to bring her in. Now, initially this starts out kind of okay. Jin is trying to kind of politely refuse, saying she doesn't really have the time to join. She wasn't ever really planning on joining up with the competition. And Chuan is kind of like, okay, I had a feeling she might not be interested. But then Rende is kind of like, no, come on, we need your help. Come on. He's maybe a little bit pushy, but not too bad. The problem is the 3rd member, Jiang. He begins to kind of push and almost treat Jin's refusal as her being almost like, looking down on them, even though she's the from the lower ring. They're the kind of middle ring kind of boys. Why are you refusing us? This is such a great opportunity for you. And he starts to kind of insult her. I can see why Sifu Q sees her as his star pupil. We're wasting our time. And you can see Chuan in the background is kind of like, Jiang, we don't want to go down this path, like just trying to, but not quite stepping in to stop him. So he kind of keeps going on. And Jin begins to get more and more annoyed at this, of course. She turns around and calls them kind of snobs, like she doesn't want to be part of that. And they begin to get like a little bit insulted by this. Jiang then kind of pushes Jin up against the wall. Stop pretending like you're better than the rest of us. You're only a poor refugee. No wonder you're always alone. And without even realizing it, he's hitting all the kind of right or wrong buttons for Jin at this point in time. Saying that she's always alone after what's just happened with Susu. Now, they don't know the situation there exactly. So you can't maybe blame them there. But it's the wrong thing said at the wrong time. And this accelerates this incident, of course. She tries to get out of here, like, leave me alone. He can see that he's riling her up, Jiang, here. So at this point, the other 2 do actually try to step in to stop Jiang. It says here, Rende kind of pulls him back. Juan kind of steps in between them, of course. He actually, he tells Jin to go, which Jin doesn't particularly like, but they're trying to kind of correctly sort of pull this situation apart. Jiang, shouts back at Jin, here's a tip, you should figure out where you belong and stay there. And Jin just kind of loses it a little bit at this point. Like, she's ready to fight, basically. She wants to hurt Jiang. So we go into a little bit of an explanation on Jin's earthbending skills. So we know that she's not particularly great, but we do highlight here that even though Gong Gong didn't want Jin to pursue her skills, her mother convinced him enough that they were able to teach her the basics. And specifically, she does know how to defend herself with her earthbending, even if she's not particularly powerful. So she puts her hand up against the wall and basically grabs with earthbending a rock the size of an egg out of the wall. And she's ready to sort of propel this right at Jiang to hurt him. She's really kind of lost her head at this point a little bit here. Right as she's about to throw, she feels an opposite force kind of opposing her own earthbending. And it's revealed to be Chuan. So he is also an earthbender and actually more powerful than she is, because he is able to stop her from using her earthbending here to hurt Jiang. And so she ends up walking away. The situation eventually kind of diffuses itself. But Jin comes out of this kind of feeling like this went terribly, everything's going wrong for me. As pathetic a girl as he believes me to be. So she just thinks like they've completely just picked on her, and the fact that she wasn't able to kind of do what she wanted to do with the earthbending just highlights another failure on her part. If she can't do this, how's she going to be able to do anything for Susu? So you can sort of see the kind of situation there where it just wasn't great kind of on all sides. And going straight into chapter 8, we're going to see in the second half especially the follow-up to this, where of course she's not joined their team, a fight nearly broke out, and the friends basically had to restrain Jiang, and Chuan had to kind of stop Jin from doing something that might have got her into trouble. So anyway, chapter 8, she heads back home to Gong Gong. He kind of seems to sense that she's in a bit of a mood, she's angry about stuff, but Jin can tell that this is kind of one of Gong Gong's bad days. His hair is unkept, he has bits of food in his beard, his stuff is a little bit kind of messy all over the place, he hasn't quite done all the work that he had kind of planned to do, and she kind of goes to clean him up. He then starts talking to her, but he talks to Jin as if Jin is Jin's mother. So he says, Biyu, don't be sad. So that's B-I-Y-U, which I assume is Jin's mother's name, which is interesting because that's also the name of the quote-unquote friend/villain character in Suki Alone, the comic. So they've kind of reused that name here. But yeah, Biyu, don't be sad. I'll sing you a song. And he just kind of rubs her head here. Gong Gong hums and smiles at me, but his hazy eyes tell me that he's somewhere else entirely, lost to a past where I was not yet born. And this is the kind of truth of Gong Gong's kind of situation, that this just continues to happen more and more, where he doesn't even realize it's Jin and not Biyu. But anyway, then she heads over to the Wen bakery, where of course she's continuing to help out. She's doing everything that she can. She notes that they're under a lot more pressure now because they don't have Susu to help. And also the father's not helping, because they do highlight here that the reason the father's not really involved in this is because he's working security for the gambling house that he basically has to pay back. So he can't really help out with the bakery. And it's stressing in particular Mama Wen, Grandma Wen, and Jin's help is particularly important. Mama Wen does highlight that what the family is trying to do is the reason they're keeping up this kind of relentless pace is that the faster they can make the money back, the sooner that they can bring Susu home. So the family's approach is to try and buy out her contract if possible, but it's an expensive contract, given that again it was a contract big enough to be kind of worth the kind of price of an entire bakery type thing. But yeah, that's the kind of idea, and it's kind of for the first time that Jin thinks money actually might be a way to get Susu out of this. And she immediately tries to give the family some of the money that she has saved up to go to the kind of fund to get Susu back. But Mama Wen will not hear anything of this. No, we can't accept that from you. And she just won't hear anything about it. As much as Jin wants to, no, Mama Wen won't accept that help. And Jin is thinking, how can I make that much money as quickly as possible? This is now an idea in her head. Where can she get the money from? She then we cut to, this is the follow-up scene to the previous chapter in particular. She goes back to school and Chuan approaches her after she goes to the Huyan apothecary, of course. Yeah, he steps out to intercept me, and he basically just goes up to her. He's a bit embarrassed, but he does say, like, we were sincere in our invitation to you yesterday about wanting to kind of join our team. We're wondering, like, would you reconsider overall? And she's, of course, particularly upset because of what Jiang said. And he even responds kind of saying that, like, me and Rande don't believe the same things as him. We were as shocked as you were with what he said. We wouldn't have to work with him. We could find someone else to fill the 4th spot. So Chuan is trying to be kind of reasonable in this situation here. She kind of points out, you didn't seem to have a problem with him shoving me into the wall. And she's getting more and more kind of embarrassed and also like angry at this. But you had a problem with me retaliating. So she's kind of very much picturing the situation as like, you probably should have spoken up sooner to kind of really stop Jiang doing what he was doing, and you maybe put a little bit too much of it on me. He points out that the reason he did what he did in the way he did was that you don't understand. Jiang's father works for the Minister of Culture. If you hurt him, there will be consequences. I was trying to help you. And she's just like, what? Should I thank you then for being my protector? I thought you didn't approve of charity, which is, of course, a reference back to their first encounter where, of course, he said to her, we're not a charity because she didn't have the money for the medicine, of course. He does wince and is like, yeah, I deserve that one for how I handled that initial situation here. She then, is like, you know what, I would be willing to work with you for a price. And she kind of throws out effectively the amount of money that will be needed to pay back Susu's contract, which makes Chuan more embarrassed because now she's kind of, in a way, mocking him and his kind of sincere proposal by this, like, crazy fee being attached to it. I'm trying to be nice and offer you an opportunity in good faith. It's not a joke. And she's upset because now he's kind of offended when she's actually the one who's offended. And you can see that this whole situation is just like they're not communicating super well and it's just going completely out of control overall. She does say, I have to come up with that money somehow to help someone who is very important to me. I wish I sent that rock into your thick skull instead so you could understand that some of us have bigger concerns to worry about than winning a ridiculous competition for bragging rights. And he says, I didn't know. But she says, no, you wouldn't know. You will never understand. Soon I probably won't even be a student at the academy and you won't ever have to see me again. He says that he's sorry, but this time she kind of rushes off and he can't stop her. And she just leaves this kind of situation feeling like he's this spoiled, middle ring kind of boy who doesn't really understand. When it's an interesting one to go back through this because I do think you have to factor in that, like, Jin, even at the start of the last chapter, before kind of things went wrong, before Jiang said what he said, she went into that conversation very annoyed and angry of just feeling everything is unfair. And that did kind of impact the way the conversation actually went. And now you could tell, especially when Chuan comes up to her and is trying to be a little bit more reasonable and explain to her kind of the situation here, that she's interpreting everything in sort of like the worst possible way. Kind of trying to almost say, like, how can I apply the most malice to kind of what he actually did? When did he really do anything wrong? His approach was maybe like a little bit off, but he is trying to be sincere. And then she kind of really kind of goes in on him for not knowing kind of everything going on in her life. So it's one of those situations where, like, the book, as we kind of go forward, will kind of highlight this scene a little bit as, hey, some people who met you around this time think that this is who you are as a character, Jin, that this is the way you kind of conduct yourself to a certain degree. It's not. We know this is just what she's like now because she's so annoyed about the kind of situation she and, I guess, Susu have found themselves in. But it's not representative of who she is most of the time. So it's just that, like, you know, poor communication kind of scene where, you know, you understand Jin's perspective completely, but you also understand why Chuan is a bit like, yikes, kind of like, why did I kind of bother in a way? Because yeah, he doesn't know the full situation with Susu, and like he didn't know that, oh, the reason you were not really into doing the competition was because you had a lot of other stuff going on. And, you know, is that really a problem just because he didn't know that information? It's an interesting one. But it obviously speaks to the idea of, like, he's an important character in this book. Look how badly their initial, like, 2-3 encounters have went. But in a kind of funny, ironic twist, he is going to be the key to giving Jin a chance to get Susu back. And it's like, how does that come to pass, given how awful everything has kind of gone from here? But you can tell that everything is just building and building and going wrong for Jin. And that's the kind of point of these chapters, is that, like, Susu's gone, she's now questioning a lot about school, then the kind of boys come up to her and are kind of mean and don't understand kind of things. She goes back home to Gong Gong and he has one of his bad days. You know, she then, you know, goes to Mama Wen and kind of realizes, okay, there's so much money, is there even a chance to do that? It's just everything piling up. And so, yeah, even though, yeah, Jin is quite angry in these chapters, it is understandable, but, like, it's not, I think, completely on Chuan that, like, this all went the way that it went, which is going to be interesting as we go into the their upcoming kind of scenes together. But there are my thoughts on chapter 7 and 8. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on these two. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.